Starting here. This is class number 105 of Faith and Calm. Tonight's topic is what's going to be with the world. And it's related to the fact that Passover is very much connected to the not only the first redemption, but the final redemption, the coming of Moshiach. Says that the first days of Pesach are connected to leaving Egypt, which was the first exile of the Jewish people. The last days are connected to the future Geulah. That's where we're headed to, the final redemption, which only started, as I said before, the launching pad started on Passover, and now we're working towards the final redemption. That is why it's a Chabad custom, and many Hasidics, started with the Baal Shem Tov, actually, they have on the 8th day what they call Mashiach's Suda, the feast for Mashiach. And our custom is actually we all assemble together, and we have a big Seder, sort of say. We have 4 cups of wine, we have matzah, and it's not quite, you don't have to say the Haggadah or anything, but we talk about Mashiach. So this is related. This is the talk that I sort of gave over at that, and it went over fairly well. But I'm going to have to make it boil. It's good for me. I boil it down, boil it down, boil it down. So the Haftorah, the reason why we call it, say that the 8th day is connected with the whole idea of Mashiach, is the Haftorah is about Mashiach. It's the prophet Yeshayahu. He's talking at a time when the Jews are very oppressed. They're very worried. The 10 northern tribes are just taken away by the superpower of the day, the Assyrians. That's the northern part of Mesopotamia. And the king Hezekiah of the southern is where they'll stand against them. And the prophet Isaiah gives a tremendous prophecy. And he gives a description of what is going to be the time of Mashiach. And this is where we get most of the details that we talk about. He says that Mashiach is coming. He's going to be able to, he will be both wise and understanding. The Spirit of God will rest on him. He will be able to judge people, not by sight, but rather by smell. Let's explain, maybe a little bit of an explanation what that means, but anyway, he'll be able to judge by people's smell, and that tremendous change, he will affect the tremendous changes in the world. There will be the lion will lie down with the lamb. Everyone heard that one before. The bear and the cow will be together, and there will actually a cow, an ox, and a lion will all be crouched down together, and a little child will be able to lead them. So these are some of the metaphors, and then the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God. So what do all these things mean, and what are we basically talking about? So the big theme here is that it's a reconciliation of opposites, things that didn't normally go together. It's not, normally, like I said, you judge on sight, but sight is very powerful, but you don't really get into the insides of things, I mean, it's, for example, a dog knows its master by smell. When you smell something, you smell it's, what it means that you know the internals of what's going on. So that's a smell can sometimes be a more a deeper understanding that smells right. It's not the correct thing. So and then the whole level of understanding of the world. Animals that normally would be fighting with each other will be together. I know the metaphor Rambam explains, and he says that means that the nations that hate us will be pleasant with us, but also it means literally that there will be tremendous change in the world, and that what is normally antagonistic and fighting against God will all perceive godliness together. So here's where my talk begins. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe in a mimer said, he asked the question based on what his father-in-law asked, and that is, if the whole world is going to see the truth and perceive it and understand it internally and see what and there won't be all this divisiveness and misalignment going on, then what do you need Mashiach anymore for? Be able to see it yourself. And I think it's a good question, because I mean, this is what we understand. That's I have 5 senses, and they're mostly focused on Let me back up a second. I got asked the question with the Passover Seder. It says, what does it mean that Moses saw God, or Moses, Moses appeared to God? Did he see it like a person? What did he see, and so forth? So seeing God, what does it mean seeing God? Or you can understand that a little bit about how does God understand, what is God's relationship to the world? So for us, we perceive stuff outside of us with our five senses: with taste, with smell, hearing, sight, touch. That's how we perceive the outside world. But we also have the other senses. For example, you don't need those senses in order to know that something is bothering you in your intestines. You don't need to, when you feel sick or something like that, or chill in your bones, you feel that inside of yourself. God is the ultimate reality of all existence. He is the reality of all realities. He is what is at the core of every part of this physical world and conceptual world. And therefore, for God, he is aware of what's going on with the world, like a human being is aware of what's going on inside of himself. He doesn't need something external to tell him what's going on. So when we understand and we perceive everything that way, when we see that the true meaning of everything in the world, here's the question: what do you mean? What do you need a God for? What do you need? I'm sorry. What do you need a Moshiach for? First, you have to have God. God's all existence. So he is us. We are him. We are connected with him. So so the answer is yes, but there's always something. Let's step back a second. There are two ways that somebody can explain something. Somebody can explain to, like, a teacher. A teacher has a big vision, knows a lot of stuff. And a teacher has to condense some of what he understands to make it interesting, a little humorous, and something that goes in and you can understand in terms of stories and other examples and other kinds of stuff. So the teacher is distilling and giving you ideas, but the main point is that the audience grasps it and understands it. A king, a ruler, authority is not coming to tell you things because you're supposed to feel that that's the right thing to do. You do it because of the authority. Whether you understand it or not, I'm in charge. God is in charge. He's the king. And so therefore, there's always a part of God which is beyond us, no matter what we are, because he is him and we are we. We are human and finite. And therefore, we need someone who is a melech. A melech is to act as the intermediary to bring down, to connect that which is normally and absolutely beyond us into at least the way that we appreciate it. Maybe not intellectually, we will absorb it, but what in Hasidic thought is called makif, encompassing, meaning there are things that I grasp and I got it because I feel it inside of me and it makes sense to me. And then there are things like I go into a room, I enter a certain day, and there's an energy there, an environment around me, and I'm tuned into it. There's a music playing, and I just don't get it, really know why, but it just makes me feel excited and interested and so forth. That's a makif experience. If there's some bigger than me energy going on, and that we can't appreciate, although we don't understand, we can't necessarily linearly write it down, put it in a book, explain it, and so forth. And there's something there. There's something powerful in that event. We went to a beautiful, you go to a beautiful state park or something of that sort, and it's there's just a feeling of attaching to something that's bigger than yourself. That's the role of Mashiach. That's the role of Mashiach, is to continue to make us aware that there's always something beyond, there's something transcendental, there's something bigger than us. And that we will still need in the time of Mashiach. But the question, I guess, really is, so how do you get there? Because what we do today is supposed to help us get to that time of Mashiach. How do we get there? So for this, we have to understand where we were and where we're going to. So the Rebbe continues in the Bible, and he says something very interesting. I found interesting. And he says, in the time of the temple, Jews at least had a piece of that experience. You could go 3 times a year. You went to the temple, and you saw godliness. You appreciated it. You experienced it. It was like, it's why you walked there and you went there for the three holidays and so forth. It was a time of when we were able to connect with God, and you went away inspired and excited. That was what the time of the temple was. And now we're sort of in a dreamlike, sleep-like state called Geulah, exile. And the first thing that happens when you go to sleep is your eyes close. You don't see. We don't see. We don't appreciate it. So our understanding the situation that we're in now is that we are in a way where we cannot relate to that inner relationship with God. We can't see it. We can't understand it. The only thing we have going for us is our netzach, our fortitude, our devotion, our dedication to God. You know what? I don't see it. You know what? And nevertheless, it's got to happen. It's like a soldier that goes to war, and so forth. He's not because he necessarily understands why he's doing this and so forth, but he follows the orders and he just says, it's got to happen. And the general, it's got to happen. And so a lot of what we have to do today is hard. I agree, it's hard. We don't have like the payback, the feeling that, the seeing of what we're doing and so forth. And so we have to do it. You have to keep kosher because we have to. We have to Passover because we have to. It has to happen. We have to stay talking to the Jews because it has to happen. So it's a lot of hard work. But on the other hand, the rabbis explain. The Rebbe explains in that and says, in a certain way, we have an advantage over even at the time of the temple, because the most you can understand is still a limited amount. But when you act with self-sacrifice, with this devotion and attack, you can reach a connection which you can't normally reach in the time even of the temple. God responds to that level of devotion in a way that's beyond even what the Jews were able to do in the time when they had the temple, before their exile. How do you see that? So the Rebbe explains, and he says, let's go back even further in history. In the beginning, I think before the creation of the world, it says that godliness was obvious, the terminology is, and the world was a vehitchatshus, which was a novelty. What does that mean? It was obvious. God was the only thing. There was no world. There was a potential for a world, but there wasn't a world yet. So it was like, oh, okay, maybe there could be a world, and so forth. Now, but in order to create the world, for us to be existent and living and so forth, you have to change the situation around. What we see is it's obvious there's a world. The question is there a God? Is he there? Does he care? Is he listening to me or something like that? And even if you're a prophet, maybe you get a little bit of a glimmer of this and so forth. It's a mental task to get there. You can't see it. He gets it mentally. So when we see something, we take it in as obvious. When we understand something mentally, it's something that we have to, like, it's a novelty, it's a surprise, something interesting that I learned about, and now I understand about it. A prophet understands something, and so forth, because he has a certain high-level soul and so forth like that. But it's not like seeing. He doesn't see God. He doesn't see godliness. He gets it as a vision and so forth, a mental vision. And we have to just do it, plug through and so forth. Comes the time of Moshiach, and the godliness will be open and obvious, just like it was. And yet it will still be a world. And that is why we have this phenomenon that we say at the end, that Haftorah, that the little kid is going to lead the lion and the leopard and so forth like that, because even little kids will see everything obvious. We'll all be prophets. We'll all see it directly. We will have a world and we will see things directly. We will be able to appreciate godliness directly. And we do that every day. We do that every day when we dedicate ourselves to God. When we go a little bit beyond what we understand, we keep more kosher, we keep Passover better than we ever did before, because what is Passover? And that's my job, and that's my responsibility. Do I understand it? Am I a Navi? Am I a prophet? I don't got that. It's a lot of hard work, and some people would look at you. But you know what? We don't let people discourage ourselves. We stand firm. That's what a soldier does. A soldier in the battle doesn't let anybody, anything, or any event or anything that's going around disturb them and so forth. We use our quality of netzach, of victory, of perseverance to continue and to continue and continue. And that opens up a channel that what will actually happen is that the world will change. So the bottom line is there are two tasks, two charges that we have in this time beforehand. One is, yes, learn this stuff. This is a Chassidus. This helps give us a vision of what's going to happen in the future. And two is, yeah, do. Go forth and just do. Split that Red Sea. Don't let the water stop you. And you will see that the waters will go to either side and flow. And it doesn't stop you. Godliness is the reality of the world. Paro couldn't understand that. He couldn't, even when he saw it happening, he didn't believe it was happening. That's why he chased after them. So Jews have this ability. We have this ability to, you look at our history, we've done this, over and over again. The devotion is just devotion of the Jews to God and to our mission is just an amazing thing. And it's people have tried to wipe us out, and we just keep going forward, forward, forward. So here we have it. Here we have what we're going to do. And here's what the end result is going to be. The end result is going to be a fantastic world, a world where, it's going to be obvious not only to us, but the animals and the non-Jews and everything in the world will obviously see exactly what, all of this was. And so there will be no more war. There will be no more suffering. There will be no more persecution. There will be no more hatreds and violence and anything else. And everybody will live in peace because it will be so obvious. What does it should be like chopping off your hand? Until that, we have a little bit more. It looks like a little bit more of a challenge to go. So that was the thrust of what I said at the Mashiach Suda, and hopefully we will see Mashiach very soon. Very, very soon, before the next counting of the Omer, which happens fairly not soon. So let's get started. We won't even have to count the next day. And with that, I'll turn over the microphone to my wife, and hopefully, do you have any questions? Let's go ahead.
I do. Yes. Yecheskel Shimon, we hear all of this, and it sounds, and I was reading in the Chumash this weekend too, and it sounds wonderful. But the thing is, number one, in the first stage of Moshiach, will everybody be there in that world? Like all our neighbors, our people that we know who. And then the second question is well, I have like three questions. How will we get there? Because it doesn't seem like people are doing things to get there, except for the Orthodox people, and then other people who are trying, like we are, and other people who, lots of people, even if they're not religious, do a lot of mitzvahs over time. So, everybody is doing things that maybe not in as concentrated a way as it would seem to be required, from what you're describing. And the other thing is there a chance that it will come early, just like the redemption from Egypt did?
Yeah, and you probably have 5 more questions. What was one question? Turns into 3. I like it. I like it very much, and I like the questions a lot. Okay, let me try a little bit. I think it's a big subject. I may not be able to cover a lot of it. So one thing that I heard you was what?
Our neighbors.
Our neighbors?
Yeah, she said are people going to be
neighbors, right? Well, everybody need to be
there. Everybody will be in a peaceful world.
Be there right away at the peaceful world, and I agree to that.
No, I don't think she's saying. Is that what she's saying?
She's saying, or that, at the beginning, she's mentioned about the beginning time of Mashiach, and then later on, will it happen right away at the outset? That was one question I heard, right? Or you want to restate your question? That's good too.
Multiple time periods that will happen once it happens. Yeah. So I wondered in the beginning period, before the dead arise or whatever, or I don't know when that all happens, or when everybody goes to Jerusalem, but in the first time period, will we sort of be in the world as we know it, but it will be peaceful?
Yeah, the Rebbe talks clearly about two clear stages in the time of Mashiach. So there will be a first stage, which with the revelation of Mashiach, where the world will still continue to go pretty much like it is. Yes, it may seem these kind of more fantastic, that more even wild stuff that happens later on. I think, though, the thing that most reflects us, we're not there yet to see us amazing and everybody coming back to life yet. We want to know more about, well, how do we see it now? Can I internalize it? And do I really need everybody, like I think you were hinting at, everybody has to be a religious Orthodox person doing all the mitzvahs and so forth? And the answer is clearly no. An interesting example of that the Rebbe pointed, one of the signs of Mashiach coming is exactly when you see people who don't seem to be clued in to a religious viewpoint, all of a sudden acting in a way which is beyond the structures of how history and civilization work normally. I don't know if I said this before, but one of the things that the Rebbe got very excited about and pointed out to us was, he said that when there was the original fall of the Soviet Union, people basically weren't paying attention to how revolutionary that initial change is. I remember listening to the TV and the news commentators, and they just kept saying, Gorbachev's not going this far. He's not changing. Gorbachev's not going to go any further than this. He's not planning to actually, change to take down the whole Soviet Union. That wasn't even in his plan. In fact, he even admitted it later. I think my wife told the story last week ago, many times. He wasn't even planning on taking down the Soviet Union and breaking it up. And that Cold War thought was going to go on forever. And I listened to all those Cold War pundits, and they had been making their living for like 40 years on this whole business of the Cold War and Cold War punditry and how this was going to go on forever and ever. And they were all saying it's not going to change. And they made very good logical, regional, rational arguments and so forth. On the other hand, though, Gorbachev also, not intentionally, but he just basically said the system is not going to work. Not because I'm religiously inspired, and not because I got a Mashiach excitement and so forth, but because the nature of nature cannot abide this. It expels it out, it vomits it out, like this. This kind of a system can't continue. It gets worse and worse as time goes on. And it's so obvious to people. And even he, who was in charge of the whole situation, threw it away. That is a inkling of the transformation that happens at Mashiach. That it's not a religious, spiritual kind of awakening. It's an awakening to, it's all of a sudden makes no sense at all the way we've been living and the way that these kind of Mitzrayim, of limitations that have been going on. And I think there's some element of that going on even now. I mean, it's really interesting. The whole world is funneling money like mad, and munitions and intelligence, and the Ukrainians saying, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Maybe that existed 40 years ago, but not even the Russians really believe in it. Only a few people around Putin seem to believe in it. And he may have some Parkinson's or other disease going on inside himself. And so he may be completely clueless at what's going on. But nobody's buying into this. This is a great idea. Nobody. That's pretty interesting, I mean, because it's an idea of how the world just vomits out stupidity, not because they see it as a godly religious thing, but because the godliness and the nature itself and the world itself has actually come to the fore, and we actually are beginning to experience that. That is the nature of what the true revolution is. That it just will be so simply obvious that, we're tired of being lied to by stupid media, forced by, into other decisions and so forth like that. And we want to have our own, and it's all going to fall apart. It's all of these people who are trying to play hocus pocus with us. We won't stand for it anymore. So and it'll be obvious to a child and so forth.
It's interesting because I have heard people say, we don't want wars like this anymore.
Right.
We don't want these things to be going on anymore. We're in the we're beyond it already. That's what a lot of people I've heard people.
Nobody likes it.
Comments. So.
And Putin thought, they'd be a pushover. They're not a pushover. And because they just won't take it. They just said, this can't go on, this can't work. And it, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Even if you outnumber them 4 to 5 to 1 and everything and so forth like that, it ain't working. So it's not working, and it's just basically proving the point. It just doesn't work anymore, and it's not working. Even the Donbass is not working very well anymore. So these are actually very exciting signs. Signs, I say, because you can read the signs differently, and I'll let people read the signs differently and so forth. But I think that there's an understanding of an of a realization that certain things just don't fly anymore, and that is. And we do that. We do that every time we stand up and we say, you know what, when it's not, we as Jews, we're not standing for it anymore. The temple is, you can't throw rocks down on people every day and then go, and burn tires and play soccer games up there and say it's the holiest place in the world for you, and so forth. And then the TV tries to hold your eyes, just see this and say, oh, the only thing is that Israeli soldiers ran up there and tried to, and oppress the poor Arabs. I'm sorry, you only told like a quarter of the story. This is a game here, and so forth. The story, tell the whole story. People will see it. People will say, I want to know the whole story. And you know what? I hear in America, they're just not buying what the news media is pushing, and so forth. And they're still very devoted to Israel because they know that the only reason that the soldiers go up there is because it's a disaster, funded by terrorist organizations who are merely trying to provoke an incident and so forth. So, it's like, it doesn't work anymore. But you have to brush things off. You have to shrug off the stupidity. You have to just be confident and clear and say what's true. And that is the midah of Netzach. That is the midah of endurance or perseverance. That's what's called for our generation. Not an easy task, I agree. It's not a Mr. Nice Guy to everybody, but you don't have to be harsh. You just have to be firm and saying, I know who I am. I know what's going on. And you'll also understand it because the truth comes out. And truth is very powerful, more powerful than me.
That's so interesting. So you're really saying that it's not about everybody doing more mitzvahs necessarily. It's about the world getting to a point where people stand up to things that are just at a certain point, foolish to them or not necessary anymore, or upsetting, whatever.
And it's good.
Is that what you're saying? That
somebody else to mature. Yeah.
People get exhausted from these kinds of traumas.
Right. That is a very religious response, and that's done by everybody, every little person around. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amy. Yeah.
I was saying that what Molly was suggesting, and I think that's what I gleaned from what you said, that it just plays out, that truth emerges over time, that the truth of a situation emerges from the stupidity that surrounds it. And that's an important thing. I wish it was emerging a lot faster, to be honest.
We want Moshiach now. We want Moshiach now. We want Moshiach now. Yeah.
I guess, maybe this isn't a question for the recording or it's something for another time, but I have been curious because there has been the, political divide, and in general, the religious Jews have been on one particular side of it. But I've just been curious what they make about the involvement of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and the white supremacists, and how that affects this divide that's been going on. Because if we are ultimately for Israel, like I've heard it said that if you are unclear about which of these two realities to believe, you should look and see where the Nazis are, and that should clear things up, But somehow, I again, maybe it's another topic for another time, but somehow the religious Jews are split on that issue, or not split, as the case might be. And I've always been curious about how they reconcile that with the presence of the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. But
Yeah, Lepan. When things go too balanced the other way, then I also expect craziness on this side, and it sort of, does it balance itself out? It doesn't balance itself out. I'm not surprised that in a world of confusion, and when things are falling apart and people's structures that they depended on so much in the old world, how what they thought was true falls apart, they go to various extremes in both situations. Either they go to burning down cities, or they go to violent attacks on the institutions, the opposite direction, from the left and from the right, and so forth. I do know that in a situation where there is turmoil and upheaval, like there was in let's say French and during the Revolution, things went too far. America somehow had a beautiful revolution. I don't know. In France, it just was, guillotines and other kinds of stuff. It turned very bad. It turned very nasty and so forth like that. There is going to be some element of that that's going on. I'm not surprised that that's happening. Orthodox Jews, I've never said that they have a uniform viewpoint. The only thing I know about Orthodox Jews is that there's more, when you get inside of it, there's more groups than you could possibly number. So I would never try and make a generalization where who's confused and who's not and so forth. What we're trying to do is, of course, push forward what the Rebbe's viewpoint was, is that this is, the solution to this is not more violent, more strident, and more or pointing fingers or making negativity counts to other people, but rather the belief and the trust and the confidence in that every human being responds to truth, will accept truth, and once it's put forth simply and clearly, they'll say, I like that a lot better than than some sort of appealing to the to the political base or something of that sort, to the more extreme and the more partisan and the more extreme parts of stuff. They'll just, there is going to be some of that. People will try and exploit that. But I don't think that I think that people are also tired of being, having their funny bone tickled and their fear bone tickled all the time.
That was beautifully put. Thank you. And reassuring as well.
Because what you're saying in a way is that there are certain narratives that people wake up to realize the truth behind the narrative. Yeah. In a way, and that the narrative just keeps going until people start to see through it, and see what the truth is. In a way, is that what you're saying? Sort of, yeah.
Trust people. They deep down they will they will respond, just because the world is aligning and we're beginning to be able to see the truth. So with that, I'll turn over the mic. Thank you for the questions. I loved them. They were very good. I'm sure there's more to talk about.
Thank you for answering and for a wonderful, sure. Thank you.
Amy's point is right. I want this to happen a little faster too. So let's get there.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Does anybody want to say anything before I begin?
Hello.
Yes, I wanted to say that a happy belated Hag Sameach to you. And we haven't spoken since the Seders, and I wanted to just, you were not there when I had asked you Heshbon Shem and how your Seders were, and just
thank God.
Pop in and acknowledge the holiday. So
really nice. And yours?
Beautiful.
Baruch Hashem. So, okay. So before I begin, I want to say that I'm dedicating this class to my cousin, Herschel Ben Rivka. I didn't find out until today that he's my age. He's, just a tiny bit older than me. And he had a heart attack, and unfortunately, and he's in the hospital awaiting emergency surgery tomorrow morning. And he has a lot of merit on his side, because I've spoken about him before. I don't know if you remember, I spoke about a cousin who was has such a positive outlook from as long as I can remember him. He was a blast to be with as a kid. And I told you once that he used to have a horrible job commuting into New York City. He lives on the outskirts of New York City, and he used to have a horrible time commuting for many, many years. And then he switched his job to a more local job. And what did he do? Before he went to work every day, he turned on the traffic reports and laughed his head off, because he found, he looked for ways to be happy, look for ways to celebrate. Yeah, good things are going on. I think he's sort of like an expert in maintaining a happy attitude. So Hashem should help him. He should have a complete and speedy recovery. So anyway. I want to start out with the 4 things that I always say when I begin. And his name is Herschel Ben Rivka. I think I said it. Number 1, we're in an extraordinary time. And what does it mean that we're in an extraordinary time? It means that I mean that the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us in 1992 that the world is entering the time of the redemption of the Jews and the entire world. And since he was, in my understanding, never wrong in any of the prophecies that he made in public, and he made many, he has a good enough batting average that we can believe him on this one. And also, we talked last week about when a tzaddik, somebody who's extremely holy and knows all the Torah forwards and backwards, and has made 2 prophecies that are correct. After that, you're forbidden to doubt his prophecies. So it's a thing we must believe, and I do believe anyway because he was right about everything. So the second thing is that our souls, all of us here, all of us in this world today, were handpicked by God to be here at this interesting juncture of human history. We were given all the tools that we need. We were given the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we were given the mitzvahs, which are our power tools to change the world. And finally, and we were given leaders like the Rebbe. And finally, what we're doing tonight, learning about the redemption, actively speeds it. The Rebbe told us that the fastest way to speed up the redemption is by learning about it. So anyway, today's Tanya was so interesting. We were talking before about, there's a Hebrew word called emunah, which means belief in God. And belief in God is some people are naturally gifted with belief in God, but the word emunah points to a different reality. Anybody know what the root of the word emunah is? I said it before. Anybody remember? The root of the word is, there's a craftsman in Hebrew is called I think it's an omen, uman, omen. It's the same letters. And it means, what is a craftsman? A craftsman is someone that has to practice their craft again and again and again. A fine artist has to keep up their art. A fine musician has to keep up their art. I think it was either Yitzhak Perlman or somebody, that said, maybe it was him, if he doesn't practice his violin for a month, then no, if he doesn't practice his violin for a day, he will hear the difference in his music. If he doesn't do it for a week, connoisseurs will hear the difference in his music. And if he doesn't do it for a month, everybody will hear the difference. It's when you have a talent, even though you have a talent, you have to practice it over and over again. God made faith in God the same kind of thing. You cannot just achieve faith in God and then sit on your laurels. It doesn't work that way. God brings us situations so that we're going to have to redo and once again work on our faith and once again work on our faith, because that forges a connection with God, not just a one-time accomplishment, but a constant connection to God. And so it says in Tanya today that, just like, when you see a king, you're awed by his majesty. You're awed by his majesty when he's awake and he's wearing his clothes and all that kind of stuff. If you were to see a king sleeping, you wouldn't be afraid of him. You wouldn't be so much in awe of him. So what are you in awe of? You're in awe of his inner vitality. You're in awe of what when he's active in the world. You're in awe of that. How can you be in awe of God? You don't see him, right? You don't see, God is like a king, but you don't see robes. You don't see a body. You don't see anything. But what do you see? The entire world is Hashem's clothing. The entire world is his garments, how he expresses himself. So when you go out, you see the trees and you see the sky and you see the clouds. That's like the outer garments of God. And when you're in awe of them, you should, we need to be an uman. We need to constantly train ourselves. Oh, I'm looking at this is not just magnificence. I'm looking at the extra. God is the vitality behind that tree, behind that leaf, behind that bird, God is the vitality of the entire world. And so by doing that on a regular basis, on a daily basis, we gain more of an awe of God and more of an awareness of God. So we remember that everything we see is God. And that also helps you when bad stuff happens, because you can remember, you know what? This is also God. This thing that happened to me, it's also God. And if it's God, it means that it's good for me somehow. Somehow this is good for me. Somehow this is going to bring out something in me that couldn't come out otherwise. So that's what we're meant to be. We're meant to be craftsmen. And our chief craft is belief of and recognition of God. That's why we're here. That's one of the main reasons we're on earth. So anyway, I'm going to skip straight to a story because Yaskoshin spoke a little bit at length. So I'm going to make my section short. I'm just going to tell you a cute little story that I just read. It's a Rebbe story and a Rebbe miracle story. And it's once again about a wedding. And so the story is told by the Chabad emissary in Ramat Gan, Israel. And the story goes like this. He had somebody in his congregation, Gershon, and this guy Gershon, when he had been married for 5 years, he lived in Ramat Gan, and he decided, I heard so much about this Lubavitcher Rebbe, I want to go see him. This isn't the time when you can see the Rebbe. And he flew to America, he stood online, and he waited to see the Rebbe. When he saw the Rebbe looked at him and got a bottle of wine and gave it to him and said, "This is for your wedding." And as I told you before, when people saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe, most people were dumbstruck. They couldn't say a word. They planned a whole speech to say, they planned requests, and they couldn't even open their mouths. This guy was similar. He couldn't open his mouth. He took the wine and went on, and he was just totally befuddled because he was already married, and he was already happily married for 5 years. I was thinking, what is this? Is the Rebbe hinting to me that I'm going to be divorced? I don't want to be divorced. I don't know. What is this? Anyway, he took the wine, he kept it, and years passed, and thank God he remained happily married to his wife. And his 20 years passed. He was already at his 25th wedding anniversary. His 25th wedding anniversary was approaching, and they wanted to make a big deal out of it, he and his wife. And then they remembered the wine, and they thought, okay, maybe that's what we'll do. For our 25th wedding anniversary, we're going to make a party that's like a wedding. We're going to go, they were rich. We're going to go really I think they probably were rich. We're going to do it up like crazy. We're going to have a band like you have at a wedding. We're going to have a fantastic dinner. We're going to rent the most beautiful hall. We're going to invite all our friends, flowers, everything, band, everything. That's what they did. They rented a place in Ramat Gan called the Royal Gardens. Probably it's called that in Hebrew, but whatever. The Royal Gardens, the most fanciest place in town. 3 days or a couple of days before the event, the manager of the Royal Gardens called Gershon and said, "I have some news for you. We had a sewage pipe burst in our facility. And not only is the place filled with water, it stinks. And your event that you sent out all these invitations to, it can't be here." He said, "But relax. I already went across the street. There's another wedding hall across the street. Maybe not as nice as our place, but listen, this is what we're going to do. I already booked his biggest hall. His biggest hall I booked, and we are going to make it as nice as the Royal Gardens. You will never know the difference. And what's more, I'm going to put some of my people in my parking lot. So your guests who already got the invitations, when they arrive in my parking lot, my people will tell them to go across the street because it's across the street. And so you don't have to send out any corrections or anything like that. The event will just flow." The guy figures, okay, what can I do? Well, he's a nice guy. He's promising. I'm just going to trust him. So they arrived, he and his wife, Sandy, arrived a few hours before the event, just to make sure that this place would really be what they're spending this big money on. And they went into the hall, and it was gorgeous. They had a place for the band. There was flowers on every table, plants all over the place, looked like a garden. and fantastic food and waiters dressed, beautifully. And since it was a long time to go until the anniversary party, he and his wife decided to tour the rest of the facility. And as they're going, they're peeking in all the doors, and they see one door to one banquet hall, a small banquet hall. And they open the door, and there's a very simple table there with a very simple, thing. And all there is some cheap soda, bottles of soda on the table, some plain cakes, like 4 trays of plain cakes. And I think that was it, just cheap cake and cheap soda. And they were thinking, it must be a simcha, but this doesn't even look like a Shabbos meal. It's not even as fancy as a Shabbos meal. What's going on here? So they just were curious, and they went to the owner and they said, what's going on in that other hall? And the owner said, that's a wedding. That's a wedding. That's a wedding of 2 Bali Tshuva. Bali Tshuva are people who grew up secular, and they became observant, like me, like Haskell Shimon. And they're poor, and they have no support from their family at all. Their families cut them off. And so they're making, so the owner said, they're making the cheapest wedding I ever saw. This is what they can afford. So Gershon, it dawns on him. The Rebbe said this wine should be used for the wedding I'm going to make. I'm going to make a wedding. He finds the groom, and he talks to the groom, and he says, I have this incredible wine, and I have this incredible hall, and I have all these people coming. Why don't we make it into your wedding? The guy can't believe it. He's so happy. He and the Kala come, all the guests come. They make it it's a real wedding, a chuppah, everything, the whole 9 yards. And Gershon gives a little speech about the wine and how the whole thing came to be, and then how he saw this chassid and he invited him to join him. And anyway, so everybody's so excited, and then the bride asks for permission to speak, and the bride gets up and she says, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. She said, when I first became, I learned and I decided to become religiously observant. My family was so upset with me. They were so upset with me. It was unbelievable, but they still spoke to me. But then when I told them that I'm going to marry this guy, and he's very he's very, very Orthodox, they said, if you do this, we are finished. We are absolutely finished with you. We will not give you a penny towards anything, towards the wedding, towards anything, and we will never speak to you again. And she said, because I knew that I wanted to marry this guy, I said, what can I do? I'm going ahead with the wedding. She said, but last night I was thinking, am I insane? I will have no family my entire life. I will never be able to speak to my family again. And I decided to call it off. And I didn't know what to do. And I went to sleep. And in my sleep, I saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he said to me, don't call off the wedding. He said, this guy is your correct groom. He is your correct husband. He's the guy you're supposed to marry. And he's a fine person. Don't call it off. He said, I give you my blessing. And you're going to see that I am going to be at that wedding. And anyway, and she said, with this wine, I saw that, yes, the Rebbe is here. The Rebbe did give me, this is, I see that the Rebbe said this wine is a wedding gift. So anyway, Gershon was blown away because 20 years earlier, the Rebbe had seen this and planned a wedding for a poor bride who wouldn't have any, who couldn't make a wedding otherwise. So anyway, everybody was thrilled with their parts in the story, and that's the story for tonight. And anyway, Herschel Ben Rivka, I wish you were for Shlema. This is like the 12th time I've cried since the beginning of Pesach. I'm like a fountain. I don't know what it is. So
what's going on with Herschel Ben Rivka?
No, he's my cousin who's having heart surgery tomorrow morning. Emergency
heart surgery tomorrow morning. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep
fine
him in my prayers.
Yeah.
I've been praying for two people myself during this class time, you know.
Uh-huh.
My friend Eileen, who you may have met barely once, and I don't even know if she showed her face. Her brother is having a really difficult time with awaiting surgery tonight, and I have another friend of mine who's just going through an incredibly fragile time. So she wrote to me, and I said, "Hey, I'm here in this Faith and Calm class, and I'm dedicating it internally to you."
Okay, good. What's her name? What's her name?
The first one, Eileen, her mother, I think I told you her story. Her mother was a Holocaust survivor in Auschwitz.
Yes.
And her Hebrew name, I don't know, her mother's Hebrew name was Esther, and her daughter's name for her too. I don't know what her Hebrew name is, but
So
her
Eileen,
brother is Mark. The
Eileen,
brother is Mark.
Boss Esther. Okay. And
The brother is Mark. So I don't know what the Hebrew name is. And the other one is just a friend of mine who's feeling quite fragile tonight. And I don't know what her Hebrew name is, but her English name is Nicole. And I don't have any information on the parents.
Okay, good.
But in any case, that was a great hell of a story. I got to tell you, that was a great, great story.
Okay, good. I'm going to turn off the recording, and